Help me. I don't want to die.
حتى نراك طليقة مرتاحة وسنبقى نذبح الكفرة حتى نراك عدت إلى أمك وأبيك أو زوجك وبنيك والله أكبر والعزة لله. الله أكبر.
Years after the attacks of September 11th, America continues to face a challenging enemy.
One which is totally invisible, which is submerged within the civilian fabric of society, which wears T-shirts, denim jeans, baseball caps.
But is infected by an ideology of violent global jihad. Today, radical Muslim terrorists have renewed their war against Jews, Christians, the United States, and other non-Muslim nations.
शराबी काम भी करता होगा जो जाता है उधर.
Armed with the Quran and the gun, the people of Hamas are trained to hate Israel beginning at early childhood. For more than 2 decades, Hamas terrorized Israelis through suicide bombings and thousands of rocket attacks. Its charter clearly calls for the end of Israel and its replacement by an Islamic entity from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. While Hamas military leaders were planning terror attacks on Israeli restaurants and buses, Mossab Hassan Youssef was growing up as the son of a respected Hamas founder. He became disillusioned with some in Hamas and began questioning his Islamic faith. Instead of planning terror attacks, Youssef began to prevent them.
He managed to prevent, on his own almost, to prevent more than tens and tens and tens of suicide attacks, and actually to save the life of hundreds of Israelis, and also almost on the way to prevent assassinations against Israeli officials.
Youssef tells his remarkable story in a new book called Son of Hamas.
In studying the Quran, Mossab Hassan found what he calls thousands of inconsistencies.
What Muslim sheikhs or religious people do, that they focus on only one part of Islam.
Which part do they focus on?
The part that they need for that time. If it's a war zone, if it's wartime, they're talking about jihad. They bring the verses that... It's like very political religion. And this way, I discovered that the Islam is the most bipolar religion on earth. That you can find whatever you want.
So the Quran contradicts itself?
In so many ways. But I'm telling you, the problem is much bigger than Hamas. The problem is in the God of Islam. This is shocking, and unfortunately this is the reality about this God. He's a God of torture. He's a God, the deceit God. This is what he talks about himself. Islam as a religion in general is a lie wrapped with some facts and truths, and I'm talking this with the authority of somebody who understands exactly what Islam is all about. And it's the biggest lie in history, in my opinion. And this is the biggest danger, that a quarter of population of Earth believe that this is a religion from God.
They wish to destroy a democratic and secular world.
And in its place impose a 7th century totalitarian ideology that would control all religious, social, and political life on earth.
They want to impose Islamic caliphates, Islamic superstates on the entire world.
In such a world, all debate or criticism of Islam would cease to exist. Some argue that such a world exists already. Since 9/11, anyone who dares to criticize Islam or its agenda and history faces the wrath of potentially millions of Muslims. Case in point, Pope Benedict's citation of a 14th century emperor who called Islam evil and inhuman, and the cartoon drawings negatively depicting the Prophet Muhammad. Both drew violent reactions from Muslims worldwide. To some, it appears that Muslims are always ready and waiting to be outraged. But many ask, where's the outrage at the violence committed by Muslims?
I converted to Christianity. Muhammad clearly stated that in the ends of days, there will be many who defect from the faith. Kill them when you see them, wherever you find them. So, this is the question that the West needs to understand. What part of kill don't they understand?
Islam and Islamic civilization are unique in their stance toward non-believers, and that Islam is the only religion in the world that has a developed doctrine, theology, and law that mandates violence against unbelievers. That there are peaceful Muslims, there are Muslims around the world who are moderate, who live in harmony with their non-Muslim neighbors and have no intention of ever waging war against them in any way. But the fact is that they have a very slim justification for their own peacefulness within the Islamic sources themselves. And they are only at peace with their neighbors insofar as they are either ignorant of what Islam teaches about how Muslims should behave toward unbelievers, or they have explicitly rejected, consciously rejected, those elements of Islam. There are, in short, peaceful and moderate Muslims, but no peaceful and moderate Islam. The idea that Islam is a religion of peace, however, is paradoxically enough held even by the most violent and radical of Muslims. Sayyid Qutb, the Egyptian Muslim theorist, whose writings are revered by radical Muslims today, by terrorists today, he wrote and insisted that Islam is a religion of peace. When you study his writings, it becomes clear that he meant that Islam is dedicated to establishing the hegemony of Islamic law over the world. When that hegemony is established, peace will reign in the world. Therefore, Islam is a religion of peace.
But the problem is the peaceful Muslims don't understand the edicts that comes out of the jurisprudence of Islam. If you look at the interpretation of these verses in Al-Azhar University, in the Islamic Sharia schools in Jerusalem, in Jordan, in Syria, and Damascus, all throughout the Middle East, the jurisprudence of Islam clearly state, emphatically, that the verse of the sword made null and void all the peaceful verses. And what does the verse of the sword say?
Then when the sacred months have passed, then kill the mushrikun, unbelievers, wherever you find them, and capture them and besiege them, and prepare for them each and every ambush. But if they repent and perform as-salat, the Islamic prayers, and give zakat, alms, then leave their way free. Verily, Allah is oft-forgiving, most merciful.
Kill them when you see them, wherever you find them. This is not an allegoric kill. It's a literal kill. It's the killing of Zarqawi right in front of the camera. It's the lynching that you see in Ramallah. It's the killing of over 1 million Sudanese in Sudan, cutting the hands and the feet from opposite sides. And here's the dilemma. The peaceful verse, even the peaceful verse that is quoted, even by Bush, the verse goes as follows: whoever kills a life without just cause or for doing mischief in the land, then as he killed the entire earth. You'll find the same verse in the Judeo-biblical tradition. But most Westerners never skip after that verse, which makes very clear, but as those who do mischief in the land, then cut their hands and their feet from opposite sides and crucify them, literally. And that's what you see what happened in Afghanistan. That's what you see what happened in Sudan. A huge amount of crucifixions and killings and beheadings and amputations and public assassinations. They really want to revive Islam as it used to be. This is why they call it Islamic fundamentalism.
The recompense of those who wage war against Allah and His Messenger and do mischief in the land is only that they shall be killed or crucified, or their hands and their feet be cut off on the opposite sides, or be exiled from the land. That is their disgrace in this world, and a great torment is theirs in the hereafter. The Prophet cut off the hands and feet of the men belonging to the tribe of Arina, and did not cauterize their bleeding limbs till they died.
If you read the Quran, if you allow yourself to understand what the Quran is all about, you're going to figure this out yourself. Go to the Quran, Surah 9, verse 5, and you will find what the God of Quran is asking Muslims to do against everybody. Now, it's not Muslims' fault that they were born in that culture. It's not their fault that they were born as Muslims. But what we're telling them, understand your religion before you are offended. Those are realities about their religion, and they need to recognize that.
While the European involvement in the African transatlantic slave trade to the Americas lasted for just over 3 centuries, the Arab involvement in the African slave trade has lasted 14 centuries. The birth of Muhammadan Islam and its conquests brought about the birth of institutionalized, systematized, and religiously sanctioned slave trade on a massive and global scale. In fact, the Quran allows the taking of slaves as booty or reward for wars of aggression against any and all unbelievers. Incredible and heinous abuses have occurred throughout the history of Muhammadan Islam. By the Middle Ages, the Arabic word abd was in general used to denote a black slave. Ibn Khaldun, 1332 to 1406, the preeminent Islamic medieval historian and social thinker, wrote, "The Negro nations are, as a rule, submissive to slavery, because they have attributes that are quite similar to dumb animals." It should also be noted that black slaves were castrated based on the assumption that the blacks had an ungovernable sexual appetite. When the Fatimid Caliphate came to power in Egypt, they slaughtered all the tens of thousands of black military slaves and raised an entirely new slave army. Some of these slaves were conscripted into the army at age 10. From Persia to Egypt to Morocco, slave armies from 30,000 to up to 250,000 became commonplace. 2 women for every man were enslaved by the Muslims. While almost all the slaves shipped across the Atlantic were for agricultural work, most of the slaves destined for the Muslim Middle East were for sexual exploitation as concubines, in harems, and for military service. While many children were born to the slaves in the Americas, the millions of their descendants are citizens in Brazil and the United States today. Very few descendants of the slaves that ended up in the Middle East survive.